Welcome, everyone, to Wizards and Warp Drives, the podcast where three grown-ass men get deeply nerdy about the things they love. My name is Nacho, and joining me this week is Fred from How to RPG and the mighty glue stick himself, Mr. AJ Pickett.
Hello.
Hey.
Hello. We're going to engage those warp drives very shortly.
Yes, we're full on warp drives today.
Yes, we are. We are going to dive into Star Trek. We're not just Star Wars nerds, we are also Star Trek nerds. So, yeah.
Multi-denominational nerddom.
Yeah.
Yep.
And you can be a fan of Star Trek and Star Wars. And the good thing about this podcast is, as we're talking about Star Trek, AJ won't accidentally call it Star Trek when it's actually Star Wars, because we are actually talking about Star Trek this time.
Guilty as charged, yeah. I'll do the reverse now, just to really frustrate people.
Off here, me and AJ were talking about this recent Neil Gaiman debacle, and he kept calling him Neil Diamond, which was
Neil Gaiman. Yeah, Gaiman and Diamond sound the same. Yeah, it's that I in his name that confuses me. So I'm he's Neil Gaiman now forever in my mind.
Okay.
We'll try and purge him from my mind, as if anybody hasn't heard the news. Yeah. Apparently, there's another beloved creator of content that we can now chop out a large section of our brain if we've been a fan, and dump that in the too hard basket of because he's a bad guy.
2025, I've learned not to put creators on a pedestal because they're human and they're capable of doing deviant, horrible things. So, anyway. Let's get into this. So we are going to have a look at the Star Trek movies, and we're going to do that by completely skipping Star Trek 1.
Yeah.
We will talk about Star Trek the motion picture, but we're going to kick it off with Star Trek 2, The Wrath of Khan, released in 1982, directed by Nicholas Meyer, screenplay by Harve Bennett and Jack B. Swartz, with an uncredited contributions by Meyer. James Horner was the composer, one of his earlier works, great composer, and the cast was pretty much everyone that was in Star Trek. So we got William Shatner, Leonard Nimoy, DeForest Kelley. I'm not going to go through them all.
We're going to go through them anyway, because I've got a whole rundown of all the characters anyway.
Yeah, the only real addition was Ricardo Montalban, I think that's how you pronounce his name, as Khan, which was best known for us as a child as I can't remember his
Mr. Rourke from the Fantasy Island.
The plane.
Yeah,
that's the wrong one, and that's the short one. He's the tall one.
He's the tall one, yeah. Tattoo.
It's a Pavlovian response to that.
Yeah.
Tattoo. Welcome our guests. Yeah.
Yeah, so
I can give you the synopsis of the plot of Star Trek 1 if you want.
No. Star Trek.
It's real.
Star Trek 2. Just deal with the Star Trek 2.
It's real simple. They threw a calculator into space. It came back a god, and it just needed to be held.
So this sequel does follow the 1979 Star Trek motion picture, which was met with rather mixed reviews due to its slow pacing and philosophical tone.
Fans were just happy that it was there. And then when they actually stopped and went, and examined it as a movie, they thought, okay, that could be better. So they made Wrath of Khan.
To be fair, there is an extra cut of that, but I feel like we need to talk about that some other time. It was not a financial flop, by the way. That movie actually did fine.
No, it did. It was just, it didn't.
But let's talk about the financial side of Star Trek 2, The Wrath of Khan.
Yeah, it got a massive budget cut. So, with the assistance of the Enterprise crew, Admiral Kirk must stop his old nemesis Khan Noonan Singh from using the life-generating Genesis device as the ultimate weapon. So this was a definite shift in tone towards a more action-driven, character-focused film from the first one, due to the reception of the first one. And we'll get into the facts why that was. And it was pretty much a sequel to a 1967 episode known as Space Seed, where the Enterprise finds Khan and his followers suspended in ammunition, and Khan takes control of the Enterprise by seducing a crew member called Lieutenant McGivers, who was a historian who was infatuated with him. And after a confrontation with Kirk and Spock, they disable Khan and his followers, and Kirk offers Khan exile on Ceti Alpha 5.
Ceti Alpha 5, yeah.
Yeah, which he accepts, quoting Paradise Lost, and McGivers chooses to stay with KHAAN, and that's the last we see of him until this film.
Yeah.
Yeah.
McKivers
Yep.
was probably eaten, by the way. Turns out they landed on the wrong planet, and this is the synopsis. This is the basis for where they get encountered by the Enterprise again when they go back to survey a apparently lifeless planet, because they're looking to experiment with the Genesis device, and they need a completely lifeless planet. Even a bacteria is too much. So they found some proto-organic life, big plot hole there, because it's like, every single Star Trek movie they can scan from orbit down to the molecular level, and they find some proto-organic matter, but like a large group of people have been living on this planet for a while. Yeah, no way they're not going to detect a
Yeah, and
settlement.
sand slugs.
Yeah, on
Yeah.
their sand slugs, yeah.
Yeah. So
Want me to go
Those were one of
Should
the
I-
best parts of the movie, if you ask me.
Should I go through the plot, and then we'll go into all the bits and pieces?
sure,
Yeah.
go for it.
Stealing
Fire
it blatantly from Baldur's Gate 3.
Yeah.
away. What?
Yeah.
What? Okay.
I guess this is also the beginning of almost like a trilogy, because it's a 3-part story arc, which kind of concludes with the next 2 films as well. So,
Yeah.
so this one is set in 2285. Admiral James T. Kirk oversees a no-win simulator test known as the
Kobayashi Maru.
Kabayashi Maru, with Lieutenant Savik, who is leading the US Enterprise in a rescue mission. So first thing off the bat, I forgot Kirstie Alley was in this, and I also forgot how hot Kirstie Alley was.
Peak Kirstie Alley, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I suppose that's true.
I mean, I'm talking about her ears, peaked.
Right.
Um,
Sure.
Yeah.
yeah. So
she was good in this role. She was good as a Vulcan. She had the eyebrow thing.
She wasn't full Vulcan though. She was half Romulan, wasn't she? Vulcan Romulan.
I don't know.
Anyway,
I think
let's
she had that's why
tell
they
us the
excused
story.
her crying at the end. Anyway.
Oh.
Yeah. So later, Kirk's feeling the weight of his age, and he is encouraged by. Oh, that's right, it's his birthday. He's encouraged by Dr. McCoy after he gives him some illegal alcohol, Romulan alcohol, to seek a new command. Meanwhile, the starship, the Reliant, led by Captain Terrell and Commander Chekhov, searches a planet to test the Genesis device. They mistakenly land on Zeta Alpha 5, where they are captured by KHAAN, who seeks revenge on Kirk. This fucking scene disturbed the shit out of me as a kid.
Yeah. It really is a scene from Baldur's Gate 3 where they get the brain worm and put it in his ear, and it chews its way into his brain. It's really horrible. It's really quite horrible.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's still horrible now. I watched it last night, and it's still horrific, this scene. So he basically puts a slug. He explains there's a slug on this planet, and it's
the offspring of so he's got the larger sort of slug creature, and then he much like the sandworms of Dune, he goes between the chinks of its armor and pulls out one of its offspring, which is sort of attached to it, and then just drops it onto Chekhov's ear, and it burrows into his brain, and apparently wraps around the brainstem and makes them highly suggestible and very controllable. But not by everybody, apparently. Maybe it's just a brief period of time where KHAAN establishes control, because otherwise I'm sure they would have been able to control them later on, but they were sort of brainwashed at the end of it.
Yeah, they're suggestible to begin with, and then eventually the little slug grows bigger and eats their brain.
Yeah,
there's no more
madness and death.
Dead is,
I had phobias of things crawling in my ears while I was asleep for years after watching this.
Yeah, I feel the same.
Yeah.
I still have that problem, actually. So
Yeah.
I got that from DeviantArt, but that's right.
That actually might be one of my X cards for a D&D game if we ever have a session 0. Like I don't want anything crawling in my ears.
Good to know.
Yeah,
I'll take notes on that.
Yeah. Okay. So then KHAAN basically tells the story of the episode for anyone that didn't watch the 1967 episode, where he explains that Kirk exiled him and his followers 15 years onto this planet. He then captures the Reliant and attacks Regular One, where the Genesis device is being developed by Kirk's ex-lover, Dr. Carol Marcus, and their son, David.
Mm.
Yeah, just stop me at any point if you want to jump in.
You just telling the story. Go. You keep
Yep.
doing
Kirk takes command of the Enterprise after receiving a distress call from Regular One. The Reliant ambushes the Enterprise, but Kirk uses KHAAN's unfamiliarity with the starship's controls to counterattack. Kirk and his crew find Regular One destroyed and KHAAN's plans unfolding. KHAAN attempts to maroon Kirk on a nearby planet to, I guess, get revenge. But he's tricked into following the Enterprise into Matara Nebula.
Mm-hmm.
In the final showdown, Kirk exploits KHAAN's tactical areas to disable the Reliant, and KHAAN dies. But as he dies, he activates the Genesis device, which creates a new planet, but also threatens the Enterprise. Spock sacrifices himself to repair the ship's warp drives and save the crew. Before dying, Spock tells Kirk to remember, and his casket is then sent to the new Genesis planet. And then we get one of the most saddest bagpipe moments ever.
God. Yeah.
Yeah, they did the whole Superman thing, killing off the main character, and then bring him back again at some later point. But yeah, Spock was dead at the end of that movie. It was quite shocking.
Well, there are a few things that, because we didn't get that movie till much later than everybody else around the world, particularly the Americans got it. It was a long time before we finally saw it. I think it was like 6 months. They'd already gone into production for the next movie by the time we got it in New Zealand. So I actually remember at the end of the movie where you kind of got an idea there's going to be Spock's not dead, and then they say, stay tuned or something like that for the search for Spock. And we're like, oh, hang on, he's dead, but they're going to go and search for Spock, or they're going to go and find his ghost or something like that. And you're like, oh, hang on, it's on the planet that's regenerating shit. So he's probably going to come back to life. Okay, all right, okay, we know we've got So yeah, it wasn't the downer that you were expecting. You're like, okay, we're gonna get Spock back. But this movie financially was weird, because the first movie cost $44 million to make.
On what? Brown?
It's a lot. This Star Trek 2 movie cost way too little money, frankly. It only cost about $12 or $13 million, which is why at times it looks like a TV show.
Yeah.
Because they're basically making it like a TV show.
So that is one of my facts. Is it was actually it was initially considered to be a TV movie before it's led to its theatrical release, and that was just due to the fact that the first film got such a bad rep.
Yeah. So they went back to formula and went, well, okay, we've got popular because we're a TV show, so let's make a TV show movie.
Yeah. But I mean, the first movie made was $44 million to make in budget, but it made $139 million. So it actually made a profit. It was profitable. It just wasn't that exciting because the first half of the movie is quite slow and boring, and the second half of the movie actually picks up, and we kind of get Star Trek at this point. But this movie actually kind of does the same thing, but it made a profit of $97 million worldwide on 12 million. So it probably did better financially just because it cost so little to make compared to the first one. But the first one was by no means a flop at all. It made back 3 or 4 times its budget, which is what you need to normally do to get profit.
Yeah,
and reestablish the franchise.
Yes, it did. Yeah. So Gene Roddenberry, there's a poor story. Poor Gene, because the first movie had done so badly, was forced out of the sequel's production because the first movie was considered boring, and it was most of the time, but not a financial flop. So he was in the background, but he was still sort of like credited as an executive producer, with really any feedback he gave, they just ignored. And he's also responsible for dropping what was going to happen at the end of the movie. leading to a sort of a bit of news or an outrage from the Star Trek fans about the fact that they're going to kill Spock, and people were pissed, really, really angry. So what they do in the movie is they present him as dying, and then you discover a few minutes later he hasn't actually died. So they kill him off the pretend way at the very beginning to make sure that the media and the fan frenzy that was so viciously angry thought that was the scene that they were talking about. But then he's not actually dead, and then they kill him off again.
Yeah, it's interesting too, because I think at this point Leonard Nimoy was in his "I don't want to be known just for Star Trek" headspace, where he wrote that book "I'm Not Spock," and then later on wrote "I Am Spock," which is interesting. But yeah, and also the appearance of Montalban and the entire bunch of genetically engineered dudes changes quite a lot because they've been stuck on this desert planet for a long time. So they go from dark hair and swarthy looking to blonde surfer look.
I've got some interesting facts about them, so I'll get to.
Oh, yeah, so it's quite interesting that he looks completely different.
We'll explain their looks. Yeah, so
Go ahead.
Yeah, you're right. So this was made without Roddenberry's. He had limited creative control due to the first film's reception. His original idea was a time travel story involving the Klingons, JFK, and Kirk. Apparently,
yeah. He loved going back into doing historical pieces, which would have been a terrible flop for a movie. And also, he was at that stage of his writing where he was doing lots of man versus God, creation of life stuff. That's where Q and data and stuff come in. And a lot of Gene's stories were very esoteric. Wrestling with questions like that. Well, he had a lot of that stuff where what happens if you actually confront a god in the stories. Like there's the Greek gods that they confronted, that sort of child immortal that had them trapped and was treating them like a plaything. Same sort of theme in a lot of his shows, and this was kind of away from that, which was a good idea.
Well, but it's funny because they went back to that because the Undiscovered Country is very much the meet the child god. And they also used time travel because they did that with the Voyage Home. So they might not have been dealing with JFK or anything like that, but they definitely used a lot of what he was throwing out there.
Yeah.
So KHAAAN was chosen because the screenwriter Harve Bennett basically binge watched the entire Star Trek series, and at the time I guess Ricardo was riding high on what was his program called?
Fantasy Island.
Yeah, so he kind of really stood out as the villain because he's very charismatic. He initially didn't want to do it either. They settled on KHAAN. Various titles that were considered was The Genesis Project, War of the Generations, and The Vengeance of KHAAN. Before they settled on the Wrath of KHAAN.
Mm-hmm.
The Genesis planet scene is considered one of the first fully CGI sequences in film history.
Now you know where the budget thing comes in, because they were saving lots on not building sets.
Well, I do believe. I mean that scene itself could have been cut out of the movie, and it wouldn't have affected the movie in the slightest. It was. It really wasn't a pivotal scene in any way, shape. It didn't need to be there. And Industrial Light and Magic did the scene because they had heard that there was going to be this terraforming device in the movie, and so they made the scene to try to sell the idea because nobody wanted to touch CGI with a 10-foot pole. And so that whole digital scene, which should have been extremely expensive, was really done as a marketing ploy by Industrial Light and Magic to convince other people that you could do CGI and it would look good.
Yeah. The first movie to really embrace CGI special effects for space stuff was Last Starfighter. And that was them proving their point that they could make a low budget thing. Yeah. It's interesting that there was a lot of fights and nebulas and stuff like that in this movie. A lot of spaceship combat, which was interesting. It was very tense, very sort of cloak and daggery thing. And there was a couple of good episodes earlier on. I could see where the writer was like binge watching, because there was a fight earlier on where they'd never seen a Romulan before. And Kirk was describing old space combat as being like submarines, right? Not being able to see the enemy and stuff. And so they sort of borrowed that in this, where the Enterprise was playing cat and mouse with the other ship, and he realized that KHAAN didn't know how to fly in 3 dimensions. He was only flying around in a flat plane like a sailing ship, which is an interesting plot point. Yeah, because I mean, he's super intelligent KHAAN, right?
Yeah,
doesn't know how to fly a spaceship. It's like, hello.
Yeah. I can live with the fact that apparently KHAAN is not familiar with the systems and everything on a spaceship, because he's been frozen for hundreds of years, and he's been stuck on SETI 5 or whatever the hell it is.
Yeah,
for,
eating sand slugs, probably not good for the brain nutrition. Yeah,
and maybe some of his crew after they've been killed.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
But here's the fact. It was the only thing they could do. Because how do you beat a super intelligent individual who's physically more stronger than you and smarter than you? And there doesn't seem to be any kind of weakness other than he throws these tissy fits constantly, and his ego is incredibly overblown. But I thought it was interesting that the director of photography, which was done by Gain Rescue, it generally made the film look like a TV show, because they literally went and hired a whole lot of people in the crew who did TV shows, not movies.
Mm-hmm.
And this is part of the reason why it was so cheap, and it was shot fast too. So it doesn't look like a science fiction movie or film classically. You get bits and pieces. Usually it's the IMF scene, Industrial Light and Magic scenes, where there's spaceships going on. But as soon as we go to people, it looks literally like we just jumped into the TV series, not a movie. So,
yeah, it was, like I said, it was initially considered to be a TV movie, but they were pretty happy with it as it was developing, that they decided to release it theatrically. Yeah, and you're right about the submarine. Submarine battles was definitely inspired. The battle between the Enterprise and the Reliant was inspired by a submarine movie called The Enemy Below, 1957.
There you go.
That's been credited. Spock's death was also leaked before they'd finished filming, causing a lot of backlash against Leonard Nimoy. A rewrite extended his role to give the death more emotional impact, and they were also considering writing multiple different endings in the novelization of Wrath of KHAAN and releasing them, so that no one actually, because apparently the books came out before the films for some reason back then, just so that no one actually knew the true ending of the film. But there was also multiple deaths on the set. Like, scripts were stolen. There was a writer who was caught recording crucial details, leaking. So I guess it was that behavior, I guess, existed before the internet.
Yeah. It's really interesting, because the studio didn't know, they didn't want to compete with the sci-fi film market. Essentially, they wanted to bring back the original crew and do a new TV series, but then they decided to keep the original crew for the movies, and then go with I think it was 87 that they made Star Trek: The Next Generation. So this is like a period of 5 years where it was very much up in the air whether there was going to be whether the original cast were going to be making a movie or making a TV show.
Yeah.
And I don't know whether they knew what they were doing when they were filming Wrath of KHAAN, whether it was a TV show or a movie. It was a bit of both. It would have been very confusing for them. So I can see why.
So many rewrites before they got the final script. And that doesn't sort of help.
It would have been really hair-raising as an actor.
Myers. Nicholas Myers did it in 12 days.
Right,
That's considered unreal. But he did it because it had to be done, and it was going to take too long to get the contract sorted out by Paramount, and stupid Paramount had already booked and sold tickets for the bloomin' movie before they'd even got a script finalized.
Because studios, and here's the thing that people need to realize, is studios and studio executives have no idea what they're doing. They have no idea. They don't do any market research. They don't do any sort of prepper work, and they put these massive budgets and things. Like every episode of Star Trek Next Generation was like $1.5 million. And so a movie that cost what, 12 million?
Yeah.
They were making TV shows essentially. That was what they were trying to do.
A lot of the original cast didn't want to come back either.
Well, most of them didn't want to come back for very good reasons too, totally legitimate reasons. And unfortunately, this movie did not correct that problem, but we'll talk about that later. I would like to talk about the music by James Horner.
Oh, yeah.
Great score.
Because
R.I.P. James Horner, one of my favorite composers.
Yeah, because James Horner had originally just asked for $10,000 to do the score for the entire film, which is considered very, very cheap for a film. And what work he was doing on it, and the fact that he was asking so little, and because his score and his theme music was so good, Paramount gave him $25,000. They didn't just double his price; they 2.5 times more than what you're going to ask for, which is crazy to think that. Because normally, studios would just say, sweet, we cut a few costs, that's great, we'll keep that money for ourselves. But no, they didn't. And I think one of the reasons why is, one, they obviously had somebody with some brains in there, but the music itself is really classic. It's rousing. I was trying to figure out how to describe it. It's got that rousing feel to it. It's hopeful. It's got a journey focus to it. It's also really fast action, swashbuckly in terms of a theme.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, the music is far superior than the story, because the speed of the story is actually very slow at the beginning and picks up near the end for sure. And near the end of the movie, the music sort of matches. But I think it helped improve the movie immensely just by having that music through a lot of it.
That's a pattern of James Horner, because you could probably say the same thing about Kroll. His score. Kroll was amazing.
Yeah. Truly. Yeah, if you listen to Kroll and Wrath of Khan, you'll hear that James Horner was basically working on the same sort of he's got definite themes and styles. And even like Robin Hood and other movies where he's done that sort of thing, a lot of use of the French horn and the horn section in combination with deep strings and cellos and stuff like that. So he's got a very distinctive heroic vibe with the French horns, which got emulated a lot by Marvel, of course.
That was the vibe they wanted. It was like the sort of MMO they got given was swashbuckling.
Yeah, so because the French horn is good for long wistful notes, and then it's also because it's classic Siegfried's. It's a horn chord. It's literally the horn that Boromir and stuff blows is the French horn. It's the long horn but curled up. Right.
Speaking of that, I watched that Lord of the Rings animated movie last night as well.
The Rohirrim one. Yeah, it's not bad.
Yeah, it's got the horn. Yeah, it's fine.
It could be shorter.
What I did notice when I was looking at a lot of the behind the scenes stuff is that production designer, Joseph Jennings, the design itself is actually pretty good. And I mean, there are times where it feels more like they're on a sailing ship or a ship, a ship that sails on water rather than through space.
Right.
But he does a reasonable job. I was also really amused by the producer, who seemed to be able to talk themselves up to the point of being some sort of bloomin' hero. God almighty, I wouldn't want to be in the same room with him. He'd suck all the air out of it. But, the movie was successful. He was the producer. It obviously worked. I think the editor, William Dornish, who had to link this movie together, it's a fairly simple story, right? There's not too much going on, even though Kirk's life seems to be in disarray, and so does Khan's. I think the first half is definitely very slow. That's done quite deliberately. The second half is a bit more action packed. Not so much, fighting physically or shooting people with laser beams, although that does happen occasionally, or once I
Yeah.
think it is. But it's mostly the starship battles, right? That's really where the action is, and plenty of people dying along the way.
They're almost like similar characters, like Khan and Kirk. They're over sexualized. It's a. We were talking about this before. It's a
Yeah.
dick measuring contest
Yes.
in a lot of ways. Like they just they're both as bad as each other. Just they've got different moral compasses, I guess.
Hmm.
DeForest Kelly thought the script had too many storylines and his character was neglected. So
Even
did
though he had that whole episode, that whole scene with the birthday drinks with Kirk, which was major spotlight on his character, but whatever.
Well, I mean,
George.
he had the funnier lines too, to a certain degree.
He's
but
always quite funny. I do like Bones.
Yeah.
I think I like Carl Urban's version of Bones is great as well.
Yeah.
George Taki, is that how you say his name?
Takei, yeah.
Takei. Oh my. He almost didn't return to Sulu's role because he didn't think it was. He didn't have. A lot of them just didn't think they had enough to do in it.
Well, because to be fair, they didn't. Let's get. I mean, he didn't want to reprise the role for Wrath of Khan, and Shatner had to go and harass him and to persuade him to return because he wasn't going to return. And Sulu's character was given a very light role. The only thing that sort of had him stand out to any kind of degree was the fact that partway through the movie, when Kirk is not on the ship, and Spock is not the captain either, he gets to be the helm officer on Enterprise, but he had no character development really whatsoever. So it was really just an acting role that where he gets to be background fodder for the Trinity, Spock, Kirk, primarily Kirk, and McCoy. So I can totally understand that. And
they also had a role there. No, you go. Actually, sorry, I'm going off topic. No, you go.
And I think we need to realize that this movie really was about two characters. Even though they say that they were talking about the Trinity, McCoy, Kirk, and Spock. This was really about how do we can't make a Star Trek movie if there's no Spock, because Spock is the only character. Leonard was the only actor to ever reprise the role when it was first released. Everybody else got replaced. He's the only one who's been there the whole time. So the death of Spock was really grim near the ending, and Leonard wanted something meaty for a character because he didn't see any other reason to come back. He didn't want to play the character because he was just playing second fiddle like everybody else to William Shatner's Kirk. So this is why they had to change it, because when they aired the ending, the audience hated it. They were so depressed. They did not like the movie. So they had to include the capsule of Spock's body going onto the planet that was terraforming. And they had to have the mind meld with Spock to open it up to Spock might come back some way when he was doing the mind meld with McCoy. And they saved the final words. Normally those words, they were going to say them at the very beginning. They saved it to the end, and they had Leonard say them. Spock basically say the words instead of Shatner. And this is to, I guess, take a movie that was kind of really a downer and turn it into not being a downer and giving it a bit of hope that, because they didn't have that. A lot of that got kind of lost along the way.
Yeah.
Might I say that they had the best Star Trek uniforms out of all the movies in this in the show? Might not have been the best to wear, but certainly the best looking and most practical looking uniforms.
Yeah, I was always concerned that they all had red shirts.
Yeah, I guess
because
that's one of the reasons why I liked it, because of that that lack of the red shirt thing.
yeah, the red, the fact that everybody's a red shirt, and they say, oh, we're going to kill off Spock. Yeah, well, they could kill off everybody if they really wanted
Right.
to.
Oh my god, the hidden symbolism. Yeah, they're all wearing red shirts. Anybody could go in this movie.
And they
Yeah,
literally did kill everybody off at the very beginning of the movie. Yeah, but it was they were acting apparently in
Right. Yeah.
Kobayashi Maru training program.
There was meant to be a love relationship between Kurt's son and Kirstie Alley's character as well.
Yeah,
but
you see in
they
the production
ditched it.
photos, they look a lot closer than they do in the movie.
Yeah, they ditched that. Yeah, and the reason that she is meant to be crying because Vulcans don't have any emotions is she's also half Romulan, but that was actually never revealed in the film.
Yeah.
And they also believe that one of the producers wanted to get rid of the embracing father and son between Kirk and David, thinking that David should be pissed off with Kirk for not being involved in his life rather than affectionate towards him.
And he was. In the movie, he displayed that quite well.
Oh, this is the fact I was going. KHAAN's crew were actually Chippendale dancers.
Makes sense.
To cast KHAAN's genetically enhanced followers, the film decided to hire members of the Chippendale dance troupe.
They were wearing too much clothes. That was the problem.
Right.
They needed less clothing.
Right.
So they
We're stuck on this lifeless planet wearing nothing but posing pouches for the last 20 years. They're all over perfect tans. Windswept hair.
Baby all on before.
What's your secret? Oh, it's the sandworm diet. It's nature's superfood.
Yeah.
Magic Mike over there. Chekhov and KHAAN never met. Though KHAAN claims to remember Chekhov, the two characters actually never met, as Chekhov wasn't part of the Space Seed episode. So this caused some massive fan outrage. I guess it was a good thing the internet wasn't around. Because one thing Star Trek fans don't like is inconsistency in their history.
But it doesn't really matter because KHAAN had access to Starfleet records and everything anyway, so he would have known. He had nothing better to do but read about the Enterprise for years.
Well, I think
was obsessed.
Walter did point this out many times and was never able to get the director and the producer, anybody to sort of understand that it didn't make any sense. But what it did mean is he, unlike many of the other crew, he got a major role as an unwilling minion of KHAAN through the use of that SETI eel or a slug that crawls into his ear. And he gets a lot more character time in the film. Maybe not character development, but at least time on film and a lot more lines. And a lot of those scenes are quite significant, right? He's a major player in this one. So he was actually treated pretty well.
Chekhov never really jumped on my radar in the original, because I used to watch the show all the time as a kid with my dad. And yeah, he was always, I never remembered Chekhov as a character, but he really stood out in this film. I think this was one of his best performances in Star Trek.
It wasn't just his performance, they just gave him more to do. Like if you think about, most of the time they never gave it's not like modern Star Trek where they will focus on one of the characters in the crew each season, each episode or something like that. So they all kind of get a little bit of, almost equal screen time. This is not what used to happen. And that
I wonder too, because Chekhov got quite popular towards the end with his foppish hair and stuff, part of the mod craze. And it was quite like a heartthrob thing. So maybe they just put more of him in there to, like, there's a lot of fan service in this movie. So maybe that was that. And they paired him up with a real good actor, like the guy who played his captain.
Yes.
That was really good acting.
Well, we've got to talk about Uhura, Nichols.
Mm-hmm.
She was given little to no character development, almost no screen time. But if there's anything you do notice about Nichols, is she's physically stunning even for her age presented in this movie. It's like all the rest of them have definitely aged significantly, and she doesn't look like she has aged as badly, which is interesting. But it's I guess it's her impact behind the scenes rather than front of the camera, because they gave her really nothing in this film. She really had little to nothing to do. other than look at a training manual and wander around aimlessly, and occasionally sit at the communications desk.
And
But
do the fake death scene at the beginning.
yeah, and do the fake death scene. That's it. Um, no, she actually she tried to convince, or helped convince to a certain degree, Maya and Burnett, trying to marginally cut back on the vision and the focus of making Star Trek and Starfleet a militaristic organization, which it really wasn't supposed to be depicted as.
Mm.
But because Maya's background was in the Navy, that's what he saw, and because he had I guess a hard on, maybe can we call it a hard on for
Yep.
the Hornblower. He basically turned a character and a story, the Hornblower, into a space adventure, because he knew a bit more about it. They didn't go to NASA or space experts to shape the movie. They went to Navy people. And
Yep.
most of the time that was just Myers. He was the
Also,
expert.
felt a little bit influenced by Battlestar Galactica at the time as well, to me. Going back.
I suppose.
Like there was that military, like all the saluting and stuff. That was a very big part of the early Battlestar Galactica. You know, that had a more military side of sci-fi to it. I
Yeah.
felt Wrath of Khan felt like they took the best bits of Star Wars and battle, like the things that were in vogue at the moment within sci-fi, and kind of applied it to Star Trek
Mm.
without sort of losing the Star Trek identity. To me,
Yeah. Yeah. To a certain degree, I'd say that's probably right. Do we want to talk about some of the lesser actors as well, and
one thing,
characters?
yeah, I just want to. My last sort of thing I want to say here is Kirk and Khan actually never face off in person. So they never actually physically meet in the film. They're only communicating through radio and view screens. But there was, in the original draft, they had a 12-minute confrontation and a sword fight. But that was scrapped for a battle of the wits. So
Right.
I wish they filmed that. I'd like to see that sort
Yeah.
of fight.
Just looking at one of the behind the scenes production photos, and they've dressed up a little humanoid figurine with a photo of tattoo stuck on its face. And they've got Montalban in his full-on Khan outfit, laughing and pointing at it because they made a little tattoo for him. That was funny.
They could have made like a Twinkie version of a tattoo.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think Ricardo was explaining that when he was doing his Khan monologues and most of his acting, there was nobody there. It was just the camera looking at him and a blank wall behind him. And occasionally he's got some scenes where you can see the crew around him, but most of the time it's just on his face. And he said this is how it would play out. There was somebody who would feed him his lines in front of him, and the camera was right beside her. And she would have had a really lovely person, he said. She would feed the lines and say the stuff that Kirk was supposed to say. And she would do it in a very sort of minimal way. It was very, very quiet. And he would just yell at her. He would just go bananas. And yeah, he said he had to tone it down a little bit at times, but it was it's basically just a camera in a room with a couple of people, and that's it. And two actors, only one actor you actually see. Talk about cheap.
He was suave. Like my mum, I remember she had a real thing for Ricardo back in the day.
Yeah.
Yeah. I always think of him as Naked Gun as well. That's the other film of his that jumps out in mind.
What about Betty Bessich? Because that's Carol Marcus, right? Khan's ex, who's the genius scientist who is trying to avoid
Kirk's ex, isn't it?
Yeah, it's Kirk's ex, who's trying to avoid Kirk taking the sun off on space adventures and traveling around the galaxy and so forth. and wanted him to be in a place that would be, I guess, safer, because what Kirk does is dangerous, and what
Mm.
she does is less dangerous, even though she's making the Genesis device.
Yeah.
Um, but I thought it was interesting. This character sort of is a depiction of the perspective of so many women, considering that divorce rates are a thing at this time. You know
Mm.
what I mean? I was looking at this, I was thinking, this is going to be so familiar for so many people who have been in the situation. The only difference is that the relationship between the two of them is still all right. It's not rough as guts. It's just they just don't have anything to do with each other because they got their own lives, right?
Yeah.
And she had some decent part to play. She got picked because of what she looked like and the fact she could play intelligent, and they needed somebody apparently to play off Kirk, who was believable as being somebody that Kirk would womanize because he would always go for the pretty girls, right?
Was she ever in the original series? Was
No,
that storyline ever like established that he had a kid? I can't remember.
no, I don't believe so. This is
No.
the first time. Yeah. And it's strange that Merritt Bertrick, who plays Davis Marcus, the son of Kirk, gets so much screen time, and is quite a volatile individual. He's quite, scathing about his father, and he knows pretty much nothing about him. I
Mm.
thought that was Merritt got a good deal out of that film, and certainly um, considering so much of the film is dialogue and not much going on at the early stage, I think his character actually added a bit more drama to things to make it a little bit more interesting. Otherwise, it could have been a bit of a snooze fest.
He passed away at a very young age as well.
Yeah.
Age 40, I believe he died. Yeah, very sad.
And then I think the other character we probably need to talk about is Paul Winfield, who played Tyrell. Was it Tyrell? Tyrell. The loyal and sensible voice of reason trying to guide KHAAN unsuccessfully until his death. And you're like, if Tyrell was actually in charge, they would have been fine. The fact that KHAAN was in charge is the biggest problem. That inflated ego of his.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Um,
It was a good film. I mean, do you think like they didn't? What's his name? The the screenwriter really didn't want to end it with the coffin going onto that planet at all. He thought it sort of like
there
you
were
didn't
a
need
few
that
people
ending.
who didn't want that to happen, and I think they wanted to sort of stay with the fact that Spock had been lost, and they didn't want there to be, but he's coming back. And what
Yeah.
they really needed to do is they needed to make it clear to the audience that even though Spock has died, he's probably coming back. There's enough evidence. It's not just one clue. There's multiple bits and pieces that lead to, which is really amusing because when we got the movie in New Zealand, they literally told us that was their search for Spock was coming at the very end of the credits.
That was an in vogue thing to do at the end of the movie. Like in the 80s, a lot of films ended with like the announcement of the next one.
Yeah.
And some of them never happened. Like we're still waiting for the Masters of the Universe
Oh, yes.
sequel. Same with Flash Gordon that we talked about the other week.
Yeah.
A lot of
Yeah.
these
There was
films,
supposed to
like
be 3 of those.
yeah, they end with that "We'll be back" stinger.
Yeah.
That was. I think Taika Waititi has done that. I think a few of the Marvel's films have done that recently. Well, I guess the Marvel films do it by getting really good actors to pop in as a cameos or like a little tintillating tease of, oh, this guy's going to suddenly have a film at some point and you never see him. Like there's a whole heap of these like discarded.
Yeah, but Marvel does credit stingers all the time. Sometimes they have 2. Sometimes, heck, they've
Yeah.
even had 3 at times, which is just crazy stuff, all designed to sell the next movie. But I want to talk about Savick because Kirstie Alley, one of my favorite actresses for many different reasons, I always found it was strange that she plays the no-nonsense Vulcan or half Vulcan officer trainee who uh, really should have been running the show because she should have probably made less mistakes than Kirk did.
Yeah.
Um, but I found her
She was
portrayal really
replaced though, eh?
wooden. Um,
Funny you should go. Yeah, she. So Kirstie Alley had just moved to LA. She was a young model and actress who was just starting out her career, and here she is stuck with this tight-laced character with the hair pinned back. All
Yeah.
you can see is her face and her hands, and so she basically cajoled and convinced the wardrobe department to let her slowly make changes to her character during the movie. So at the end of the movie, at the start of the movie, she's all fully Vulcan, and at the end of the movie, she's expressive, she's crying, she's got her hair down, she's wearing makeup, she's wearing a bathrobe around the ship and stuff. Clearly not in tune with what Vulcans do, right? And William Shatner behind the scenes is going fucking crazy about this, and he's like, "No, this should not be happening." And then essentially what happened later was when they went to do the sequels and they invited Kirstie Alley back, there's some conjecture about this, that she was priced way outside of the market. So she was asking for more money than DeForest Kelley was getting
Yeah.
after 10 years of work. So yeah, her TV fame and career took off with Cheers and stuff, thankfully, but we didn't get to see her in Star Trek anymore because
No,
she
she was
didn't respect,
recast, wasn't she?
yeah, she didn't respect the material, understandably, and also she priced herself out of the role.
so I understand this.
Robin Curtis replaced her. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I would like to
Yeah.
add a little bit more because I know a little bit more about what happened with Kirstie Alley as well. My understanding is that because you notice that her performance gets better, I actually think what she was trying to do was probably the right thing to do. And William Shatner tends to focus on himself. Let's get real. He does. And he struggled to understand this for a long time. I think he's gotten better at it as he's gotten older, but who knows? But I understand that Kirstie did not want to go back and do it again, primarily because the writing for her character, and because she really, she comes across as an unremarkable starship manual, basically, that walks around on legs with makeup.
Quoting procedures to the captain. Yeah.
And it's the most frustrating thing to watch. Her scenes are some of the poorest scenes, I think. And it's not till later on when things sort of, as you pointed out, sort of soften a bit and it's a little less regimented, that we actually get something that's sort of worth watching and listening to. And I can understand why. I think she didn't just price herself out of the market. I think she deliberately said, no, I don't want to do it. And then they said, well, we'll pay you this. And she said, no, I want this. And that ended the discussion. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think a lot of flack gets thrown at Shatner for no reason in this regard. Like, it's clearly explainable why she did what she did.
Yeah.
The result.
Yeah. But I mean,
he had much to do with it.
You look at what they did to Nichols, Uhura. Her character, even back then, was still a nothing burger, frankly.
Yeah, the female characters were really underplayed in this film.
Yeah,
like the opening training scene does feel like Kirk should just come out and say, "This is why a female can't." Just female drivers, do you know what I mean?
Well, no, they didn't actually say that.
It's carrying on the theme of him not wanting to lose control of his ship and him being a captain and not wanting to be an admiral as well. Yeah. So there's that.
It did feel kind of implied, like woman driver. Just crash my ship, mate.
Yeah.
Well, that's the vibe I got, but yeah.
Did you guys see that Ricardo was talking about coming back to play KHAAAN? This genetically engineered, arrogant, egotistical tyrant driven mad by revenge because his wife's died and most of his crew has been stranded and died on this planet, which he did really well. But he said he couldn't play the character when he started. He'd been playing.
No, he took a while. Yeah,
he'd been playing Fantasy Island for so long, he had forgotten how to play KHAAAN. And so he had to go back and watch himself playing the character a few times to finally figure out what the heck he was doing, because it sounded like he was still on Fantasy Island, which I thought was
This
amusing.
was his wife meant to be the same character from the 1967 episode that defected. Is that his wife? It's never really mentioned, is it?
Yeah, it is supposed to be the same one. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, for sure. Absolutely.
So one of the Chippendale dancers must have married them.
She ran away with one of them.
Yeah.
So, do we want to talk about the special effects in this movie? Because, I mean, it's a big part of the movie itself, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I learned a couple of things. Apparently, Industrial Light and Magic had been using, fairly low technical special effects to do spaceships for a while. And what they decided to do is they used this huge vision camera, and they stuck it on a track. And they did what they had done with most of the time, which is to have the model stay still, and they moved the camera rather than move the model, because it was easier to put the camera on a track rather than to move the model around because it was so fragile. But they were now able to rotate this ship and tilt it, I believe, left to right, not front and back, but left to right, to give it the impression of turning and change the angles and positions a little bit better, so they could have the camera moving and the model moving as well, which is slightly more advanced than what they were doing before. There was a
I couldn't remember if the Bird of Prey was in this one or part 3. So it's obviously in part 3.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then we have the Reliant ship. And the problem is that most Starfleet ships look exactly the same. You know what I mean? They're pretty much identical. And they were really concerned that the Enterprise starship and the Reliant starship that looked so similar would wind up being confused by the audience. They wouldn't know which ship was which ship. So you get a red light on the Reliant starship, you get a white light on the Enterprise ship. You get a great huge sign on the disc or dish that says Enterprise, and another one that says Reliant, right? So it's clearly marked. But also, too, by accident, Nicholas Myers, when he was looking at the ship designs, accidentally turned the Reliant starship design upside down and thought that was how it was supposed to look. And when people realized that he was looking at it the upside down, not the right way up, and that's the way he wanted it, they had to go and redraw it. So it was basically the propulsion cells are underneath rather than on top, like the Enterprise. They're below, so that's differentiated them, and they made Reliant a bit more flat, like pancake.
Yeah. It's much better design for a starship, really, when you think about it. Because the Enterprise with its nacelles sticking off in directions, like everything should loop back around in warships and stuff and be replaceable or expendable. And it's a terrible design. It's a good design for a cruise ship or something like that, but it's not a good design for a.
How many times has the Enterprise been blown up?
Oh, many.
Well,
once per movie.
I think they heavily damaged the Enterprise a lot more in the modern Star Trek movies than they did in the old one, particularly the TV series. Because if you damage the ship, right, you're dead. The crew's all going to die because they're out in the middle of nowhere. This also too, the creature effects for the SETI slug or whatever the heck you want to call it, little rodent thingy.
It's a sock puppet.
It's
essentially.
It's basically on a rod, and they just wiggle it around.
Yeah.
And they chuck some really cheap. It's TV.
If you can cover sand in the bottom, it's a free pass to put a hand in.
Chicken soup and Vaseline. Yeah, it's all you need.
And still creepy though. That is still a creepy puppet.
Oh, it is. It is.
Yeah.
And then
It's because it has that sort of like sticky saliva shit when he pulls the
yeah,
the spawny parts out. That it's just very Ugh.
If you're sitting at home
I-
and you're wondering what I meant by chicken soup and Vaseline, then and thinking up ideas for it, then you need a job in the practical effects industry.
right.
Yeah,
Go
Okay.
hang out with Neil.
head
Go
down to
hang out with
Wellington.
Neil. Go hang out with Neil Gaiman.
Yeah, he's got plenty of chicken soup and Vaseline. No, you need to head down to Wellington and get a job at Weta.
So I want to talk about the spaceships. Not the spaceships. The spaceships were pretty good.
Yeah.
I want to talk about the space suits. Do
Right.
you? My God, those
Yeah, the
space
uniforms,
suits,
good job. Spacesuits, not so good.
not convincing. Looked really cheap. Looked like TV costumes. They really did. In fact, they almost gave you the impression that they had chucked them into a cardboard box, like when you, as a kid, when you're making yourself your own space suit, and you've got your clothes on, but you want to have your space suit body bit, and you get a cardboard box and you cut a hole out of the top and a place for the arms, and you make sure there's nothing in the bottom, so you can stick your your ass through that. It almost felt like it was that. It was at least white and made out of plastic and not a cardboard box, but God Almighty, it was pretty close.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, they need
The
to get
helmet-
real designers like Geiger or people like that to come up with really interesting stuff.
Yeah, I mean the helmet did provide a good moment with the slug in it. Putting the slug in the helmet and then the helmet going on and then it coming down.
Yeah.
It was a good setup for creating the atmosphere of. I don't know.
Yeah, you're stuck in the suit with this parasite which is going to go into your brain. I mean, anybody who's played Baldur's Gate 3 and understands Mind Flayers understands how
I
terrifying
wonder
it
if
is.
they were influenced by Alien and The Thing, because all these things are around the same time. When I've gone back now, I can kind of see like he's kind of cherry picked all these different parts of sci-fi that have worked and kind of just put them into a Star Trek film while still keeping the essence of a Star Trek film. I think that's why it's very clever.
There probably was a lot of chatter between different production companies about what sort of special effects and things they were producing. So there would have been trends at the time in the industry that would reflect in the movies. So we'd see connections where they weren't.
How can we do an Alien type scene without turning this into a full horror? Like can we just capture a moment, like from that film and put it into Star Trek, which is really, really clever.
Yeah.
My answer for movie spacesuits is, first of all, stop putting lights on character spaces. We don't need it. It's stupid. And two, have the actors run around a marathon track on a hot day in suit before you put them in there in a production set with lights and cameras on them. Yeah.
Oh, that black guy was sweaty, mate.
Yeah. Well, he was terrified. He was terrified for good reason. And he was also on a desert planet, so he was the only one who was appropriately hot.
Right. Yeah.
And he was surrounded by strippers.
Yeah.
I mean,
dancers. The
male and
protein alone in their
female, so
room
you
was
go
probably
either way.
smelled like salmon.
Like strippers who wanted to put something in his ear.
Have you tried chicken and cauliflower with no fat? I was like, no thanks.
Yeah.
Know what you white boys get up to? This is damn, this is crazy shit.
I'm quite happy with my body fat content, thank you.
I think we need to talk about the Kobayashi Maru training program,
Right.
because this is where we are presented with something that has now lives in infamy. Frankly.
So first of all, you're alerted to a distress call from the Romulan neutral zone. So first of all, even going on the rescue mission, you're already violating international intergalactic space law. So the only true pass for the Kobayashi Maru is to not try and rescue the Kobayashi Maru and not enter the Romulan zone and strictly follow Star Trek regulations. That's the only win case in the Kobayashi Maru. But they say that it's a no-win scenario.
Yeah. Because
so you're expected to rescue. So I guess Star Trek regulations are ignore the neutral zone if there's a ship that's in distress. Clearly a trap.
I think the problem is, and this is why it becomes a dilemma for the captains who go through this training program. I think what they have is they have two regulations that contradict each other. One is that you must go and provide assistance to somebody requesting assistance. And then you've got another one saying you cannot go into the neutral zone. And they haven't had a little clause in it saying that one overrides the other. So you get to this position and those two rules cross over and your captain's like, oh shit, so I can't do that, but I can't do that. So which one do I do? And so they go with the one that is deal with the immediate loss of life first, right?
Yeah.
Which is go and rescue them. But I thought that was an interesting sort of thing. And
what do you think of the way they dealt with it in Abrams' 2009? Because he beats it, doesn't he? Is that from memory? Kirk beats.
Yeah, that was the original story. Yeah, there's no continuity error there. Kirk cheated. He said in the movie that he cheated to win.
Yeah.
So
he reprogrammed the computer, and he explains this somewhat through the story of the Wrath of Khan to Savick, saying, he won't actually tell her because she did ask, but they do discuss what he did, and he just reprogrammed it so that he could actually win the scenario.
Yeah, and Kirk's answer was, "I don't believe in no-win scenarios."
Yeah.
So he disagrees fundamentally with Star Trek's training and ethos. Which is interesting.
That's not what he tells.
No.
Kirstie Alley.
No, not at all. No.
No, that's for the fans only. Yeah, because we know that he's always going to continue and he's always going to survive to the next episode. So it's kind of implied that I don't believe in no-win scenarios because a no-win scenario would be the end of the series. So we don't believe in the end of Star Trek is what he's saying. Also, again, CGI effects and stuff like that, and the fact that it was taking place in like a simulator thing, not like a holodeck, which is interesting.
Yeah. And apparently running this program blows up the room.
Yeah.
Like, why would you design something that blows up the room when you're running the simulation?
Yeah. It's like we got a lot of property damage in that one. It's like, what?
And you have to fake your own death as well. That's part of the assessment.
They don't even provide fake blood.
No.
He goes like, what did you because Spock wants to know about his performance. He's like, I'm not a drama coach, Spock.
Also, numerous other parts of the Star Trek series, we've seen that in the neutral zone, there's always Romulans in the neutral zone. So it's not really Romulan neutral zone. It's the Romulans are definitely lurking around here doing no good zone.
Yeah.
We are going to encounter them and they will attack you. Also, the Romulans on several different episodes, particularly during Next Generation as well, we have this well-established thing of the Romulans playing a victim and then attacking. So this is a well-known tactic of the Romulans, is to send out a distress call in the neutral zone, lure in a ship, and then attack it. That's the MO of the Romulans.
Yeah.
I also, one of the big complaints about Star Trek, the motion picture, was they spent too much time showing off the special effects and the ship and so forth. And we do actually get at the beginning of this movie, we do get a lot of that taking place. So it's not as bad. Like, it's not like 12 minutes of let's pan around the entire ship, which we had in the first one.
Slowly take a shuttle ride to the ship with the actors looking out going, ooh, CGI.
This time it's a bit shorter. It's a couple of minutes of panning around the ship rather than 12 minutes, where Kirstie's character Savick is piloting it out the first time out of the space dock. But I thought that was it was funny how they try not to make it boring, and yet they still do the same sort of thing. They don't have the same, I guess, mentality of George Lucas, who was, the special effects are there, but we're going to move as fast as we need to keep the story going. They still sort of suffered from the let's show stuff, and they never had, this was never a problem in the TV series because they never had enough time to balls around with showing off special effects because they didn't have the budget. But they didn't have the time either. They had 50,
and it was
45
unnecessary
minutes.
in the plot usually.
Yeah.
There was lots of confusing things too, like the speed, for instance. They left the space dock at 1/3 impulse power. That should have been fast enough to get them to the moon in a couple of minutes. So she would have ripped out of there, and she probably should have smashed through a satellite or something. That would have been hilarious. Like, have the whole space station go like this. It's like, jeez, what the hell?
Trying to parallel park the Enterprise.
She just books it out of there. It's like, take us out, Mr. Savick. You just violated every regulation in space dock.
I got a mental picture of that bit in Austin Powers where he's trying to turn around.
Yeah. Or Galaxy Quest, where he doesn't know how to pilot the ship, so he's going scraping
it
on the
on the
outside.
side.
That would have been hilarious. Like, well done, Mr. Savick.
I think
Got
the
a
reason
Duracell.
I think the reason they had the ship leave the starport so quickly is they didn't want 12 minutes of panning around. They
Right.
just wanted a couple of minutes of panning around.
Get
Like,
out.
that was
Enough of this.
the idea.
Yeah.
This movie, whether people realize or not, is more of a drama. It's not really an action movie, which is not unusual for Star Trek. Star Trek tended to be that.
Mm.
And that's a hard thing. It is hard to sell science fiction drama over science fiction action adventure. Much, much harder.
Mm.
And I think this is probably part of the reason why modern Star Trek has moved more towards that rather than drama. Just because people want shit to blow up. And
I noticed the
people to die.
pacing. Yeah, the pace. I thought in my mind it was a lot more faster paced film than when I sat down, and I was like, oh, this is a lot slower than I remember. And
well,
I just,
we live in a more fast paced world now.
yeah, that's what I contributed it to. It's just a film of its age. It's just, films have changed in their pacing. And then I was thinking, fuck, if I'm finding this slow, I can't go back and watch motion picture. Because that's going to be a snooze fest.
Well, motion picture does have more skin tight outfits, so there's that.
No Kirstie Alley, though.
No, but it does have some weird shaven head space chick.
Bald chick,
Right, sorry.
It's never really explained where or what or there's no further mention of them in the Star Trek thing as far as I know.
I mean, I reckon some good drugs and you'd be all right with that movie.
Probably.
Fine.
Yeah.
Maybe a bit of alcohol.
It's an indica friendly movie. Indica couch, as we call it.
You know, let's get real. The star standout, antagonist and protagonist and villain, whatever. James Kirk and Khan, their characters are weird. They're experienced individuals, and they make a lot of really stupid mistakes.
Yeah,
in this
they're
story.
emotional in this movie. Very emotional. Like
and egotistical.
Yeah. They get brought low very, very hard. And they're very, very obsessed in this movie. And that's kind of like the whole KHAAAN. That's where the whole KHAAAN thing comes from.
Yeah.
And also Kirk's in the sequel movie to this, which I think was probably filmed around the same time, probably. I would say that the death of Kirk's son really establishes his hatred of the Klingons, and the fact that he has to get over that in the undiscovered country or whatever it is later on. That Klingons killed his son is a major aspect of his life from then on. That was a major pivotal point of Kirk. And all of the Star Trek captains, to a certain extent, struggle with that same issue that Kirk had, which is career or family. And in Kirk's case, he had the failure of both, kind of. Like, so being an admiral is a failure as far as he's concerned, because he's no longer a starship captain. And being a starship captain and him not having a family relationship with his son, that also gets taken away from him. So he never has an opportunity to fix that. And so he fixates on his Star Trek career instead and remaining a permanent captain. So
it's odd how, and I've thought about it a lot, and they kind of do this quite a bit. And like, they present the story that if you're like a starship captain, your only path is one of loneliness, where you are divorced from your family because your biological family don't want to have to deal with the fact that you're never home and you never sort of are there for them when they need you. And then you also deal with the fact that your family, which becomes your crew, you get divorced from them and you wind up at a desk, and he doesn't really see the crew that much, so he doesn't have that as either. It's weird how they've done that with Picard. They've done that with Kirk. They almost feel like they've done that with a lot of the captains. And
what's that film that came out? I think it was around late 70s. Kramer versus Kramer. I think that kind of brought into vote, and that it was okay to talk about divorce and separation in movies. I think it was kind of never really openly discussed.
Mm.
And I think that movie, because there was no real bad guy in that movie, it kind of allowed that to be socially acceptable as, yeah, this is just something that happens in life, and you can have that you can have a leading actor that is divorced, and it's not it's just part of his job.
Yeah.
So yeah, like I said, I do, going back and looking at this film, I'm going to say that, just repeat myself here, I can see so many influences of other popular films at the time
Mm.
that he's just picked from in a really smart way.
Yeah.
And I think that's what makes it a really good film. And
they do kind of, to a certain degree, sort of present that even with the death of Spock, that Kirk is kind of going to try to come out of retirement as an admiral and get himself a starship and a command and get his original crew back together, because they essentially are his family, even though
yeah,
they never get any screen time. Um,
he's not having a good retirement, is he? He's kind of
no,
he's
he's not.
just bored.
Yeah, and I think it's also interesting that when we get the follow-up movies, because they give us that promise, but in the follow-up movies, it's never established that he is actually the captain of the Enterprise. It's always like we get two movies where it occurs as a result of him breaking regulations
Mm.
or through necessity to save the world,
Mm.
and or Earth. And he's never actually given the position back at all. He through thievery and circumstance, he retains the role for key missions that probably don't take that long. And he doesn't have that resurgence of a career as a captain at all. Which is, I think, I almost feel like even with this Star Trek 2, or even Star Trek, the motion picture, but all of them, that we didn't get, and we still haven't got it, I think, in the movies. We haven't got what the original TV series promised, which is you go off into the unknown, you have nobody to back you up because you're too far away from home, and you're having interactions with alien species that are so unusual and different. And we've not had that come back.
Yeah,
Only
wagon
time I've seen it
trails in
is in
space.
Voyager.
Yeah, Voyager is the closest to original Star Trek
That
idea.
optimistic
Yeah.
look of the future.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Not the bleak.
And
yeah.
exploration and science, rather than blow shit up and head into the really the Star Wars world of war.
And the funny thing is, of course, is that it took them 5 years or so to get back from the Delta Quadrant, or wherever the hell they were.
Yeah.
Yeah, in the end. So that was a 5-year mission.
Yeah. Yeah. I've got all those seasons, by the way.
I watched Voyager more times than any other series.
Did you watch Strange New Worlds? Have you watched that at all?
Yeah.
I quite like that.
That's all right. It's all good.
So
I've got no complaints about any Star Treks, really.
There are two things I wanted to say, my wrap-ups, because I've exhausted everything I have to say about this movie. And that is, it is probably one of my favorite out of the Star Trek movies, including the new modern one. There's three of them, right? With Chris Pine and the crew. And it's that and Voyage Home. I'm not so fond of Search for Spock, but Voyage Home it's weird because it's kind of set on Earth. Are you?
No, is it Voyage Home? No, it is Voyage Home.
It is.
I always get Undiscovered Country and Voyage Home mixed up because they've got similar titles.
But it's interesting how I think the Star Trek way of making a film that's successful is to make it on a low budget, but not so low that it looks terrible like a TV movie, because you're never going to get a huge profit from a movie made like that, right? And I think it's becoming more and more difficult to make science fiction movies on a lower budget, just because of all of the digital effects that are going into play, and the pricing of digital effects, and just and just that people don't seem to be able to know how to make movies cheaper. That they, in the past they've been better at doing it, so it seems to be struggling a little bit. I think this is part of the reasons why the Star Trek movies moving forward have not done so well. It's because the
I always
budgets have
say
been
it's
too
an
high.
odd, isn't it? The odd ones are always bad. Is there like a urban legend? You
Yeah,
always say that.
yeah, a little bit like that. Also, two things. Ricardo, that amazing physique or body and shape that he has, that's his real chest muscles. This is the
Nice.
question that apparently is one of the most commonly asked regarding this movie is that is his real body? And yes, it is. He kept himself in good shape, even at that age.
He was hanging out with strippers.
Yeah, you can't hang out with a bunch of Chippendale dancers for a few weeks without getting some reps in.
Yeah.
He was already doing
a
it
gym
before.
on set.
Yeah.
Also, too, this movie I was looking at, and it was critically acclaimed by movie critics, and by the audience. I think it got like an 87 on Rotten Tomatoes by the critics and a 90 from the audience. So you can't say that this wasn't a successful movie. I mean, for
It's an
all the things
entertaining
we
romp.
might point out that this was probably not great and this was great, and like it did really well financially. Did really well. You think about it. 12 million, you multiply that by 3 or 4, that's kind of the money you have to consider going to the theater and marketing and all that sort of stuff. And so that's what 36 to 40 48 million, and the rest that they made is profit. That's pretty good for a movie.
It was a good choice to who the script writer that went back and binge watched all the episodes and decided to settle on that particular one and bring that villain back, who would have just been forgotten to the ages otherwise. Really good choice, because that film does live on Ricardo's charisma as KHAAAN.
There's not that many good recurring human characters that are villains in the original Star Trek series. Harry Mudd, maybe. But when you think about it, it's mostly like aliens and gods and weird robots and stuff like that. So, KHAAAN was an obvious choice.
I don't remember much about Search of Spock, to be honest, apart from the Bird of Prey, because that's probably one of my all-time favourite Star Trek ships.
Christopher Lloyd is a Klingon.
Yeah.
Does a pretty good job, I'd say. I believe Christopher Lloyd is a Klingon. I believed him. He looked like he would stab you.
He's everything. He's got the
no nonsense.
Such massive nerd cred.
Yeah. Also, he had a pet Targ, which is good.
Yeah.
They talk a lot of Targ in the movies, in the TV shows, but you very rarely see the Targ. And he had a pet Targ. It's like, that establishes his character pretty well. Got a pet warthog, essentially attack dog.
I do like Abraham's Star Trek a lot as well, but that one thing that did piss me off is how they downplayed Khan's return with Benedict Cumberbatch, and they were swearing, "No, I'm not Khan. I'm a totally different villain."
It's this obsession with the Beastie Boys that I can't handle. I like the Beastie Boys as much as anybody, but don't shoehorn it into my sci-fi movie every time, please. Like every time, every movie he's in, he's got to have friggin' Beastie Boys.
Sabotage.
Yeah, Sabotage or what's the other one?
Who cares?
Yeah. But never Intergalactic. Oh no. Don't put the space song in the space movie.
Yeah.
Anyway. All right. Are we done here?
Wrapping it up.
Let's wrap it up.
One of my favorite movies on the Star Trek series. I don't know why. It just is. Yeah.
It's
good music. It's good music, I would say. More than anything.
Good movie. Good bad guy. Good music. Disturbing monster.
Yeah.
Classic Trek.
Yeah.
No.
Plenty of spaceships taking damage near the end of the movie. So lots of death and carnage.
People getting vaporized with phasers. That was
good. Yes, that's right. I remember seeing those two scenes. And I'm like, did that
it's like,
person just get
they
vaporized?
do that?
Yeah. And then another one goes, like, there's two down.
Yeah. No, taking no prisoners. Okay, all right. Well, we'll get out of here. Thank you, everyone. Hope you enjoyed that. Sorry, we've been off to a bit of a slow start for 2025. We've all had a few different things going on personally, but we will get there and we'll get back into our routine of catching up and talking shit about things we like, or just talking shit. All right. Well, that's good night from me.
Yeah, it's good night from him.
And this is good night from Spock saying, we're going where we don't want to go.
Friendship. Thanks.